Well, hello, welcome to our second episode of Office Hours. Um, we are recording, so just so everyone knows that. I think you heard the little record warning. I am super thrilled today that we have Natalie Adona with us today. Natalie is the Clerk-Recorder, Registrar of Voters for the County of Nevada here in California. She has a bachelor's from the University of California at Berkeley. Sorry, it's not from Caltech, but it's from a pretty good university, right?
I
Um,
feel it's all right.
it's a pretty good university. A JD from Washington College of Law at American University, and an MPA from the School of Public Affairs at American University. She also has a certified elections registration administrative certificate from Auburn, and she's a member of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials and the County Recorders Association of California. In fact, the last time I saw you in July was at the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials Conference. That was down in Costa Mesa, which was a ton of fun. So welcome, Natalie.
Thanks.
So can you talk us through quickly? You mentioned as we were chatting before we started that you just got your ballots printed, or you just did your ballots yesterday. Can you walk us through how elections are administered in Nevada County?
Oh dear. So you want a quick
The
answer?
shorter version of it, yeah.
Okay. So hey everybody, it's good to join you. So the way we administer elections here is not altogether different from election administration in other counties. Obviously that there are differences by county and by state. That's on purpose, but I like to think of election administration as having sort of pillars of certain activities that you need to complete. And one of the big ones is voter registration, which is, always ongoing. There are a lot of sources of registration that we receive from voters, mostly from DMV, but other sources as well. And, we do our best to make sure that the voter roll is as up to date as possible. This week we had all of our election temporary workers start, and so they are doing a great job and assisting us with a lot of activities, one of which is maintaining the voter roll. Another pillar I just like to call election management that encompasses a lot of activities. For example, the process of recruiting our election workers, which we have mostly done right now. They're signing their letters to sort of commit to the election, and we're assigning them to teams. We've also, completed the process of doing things like locating our voting locations, like our vote centers. We are a vote center county, and our official drop boxes. So we're in the process of putting out notices to voters where voting will take place during the election. But other sort of activities that I would consider to be essential to an election are candidate and petition services. We do event planning. Like I said, we do stand up vote centers for all of our voters. So imagine an event that you're planning that's super important to you, like, I don't know, a big party or a wedding or something, and you've got, all of your invitations out, all of your flyers, you've invited all your guests. Now times that by a dozen locations, and it's all occurring at the same time, or in some counties, hundreds of locations.
Mhm.
So it is really event planning sort of supersized. Communications,
Mhm.
particularly with voters, but also with other stakeholders in the election, so they are communicating correct information about what we're doing here in our office. Election conduct is a big one.
Mhm.
Even though we have most people who return their ballot by mail, we've got thousands of voters who also choose to vote in person. So, that process requires us to have all of the supplies sort of stocked and ready to go. We are also, not only in the process of finalizing the ballot, but we also have to order our official ballot paper.
Mhm.
This paper is special. It is certified by the state for use in every election. It contains a watermark, if you're here in California, that is specific to the election. So we need to make sure that all of our supplies are going to get to us, including that official ballot paper, so we can count everything. Our warehouse and drayage activities, getting everything from point A to point B is sort of a big pillar, as well as our process for the unofficial results and the official results. In between there is an elections canvas that we do the sort of post-election audit. We call it the 1% manual tally. We make sure that everything that was sent out to the voting locations is returned to us. And that we are able to certify the election and let voters know what the results are. We have to budget everything.
Right.
So yeah, elections are expensive. So, all of these pillars involve a lot of different people that need to help us. We cannot, for example, have in-person voting if there are no building owners who are willing to volunteer their space.
Mhm.
We cannot successfully serve voters if I don't have a set of volunteers who are willing to come in and take that time to serve people. So this really is a relationship of trust
Mhm.
that we have with the community. And I mean, I am so thankful that there are always people who step up and help.
Mhm. Yeah, that was one of the things when I first started learning about elections, like election administration, like over 2 decades ago, that just really shocked me. Really, was just the extent to which it was really a people problem, right? Trying to find and recruit temporary workers, volunteers, people from the community, stakeholders. Just try to get all those folks involved in the process, and yeah, and make sure that they are confident that what they're doing is, helping improve the integrity and um, the security of the elections process. Um, what, so let's roll back the clock a little bit, if you don't mind, to 2020, because 2020 was the last big presidential election we had. And I know that there were a lot of things that happened, and I know that, every election we go through is a learning process. So what lessons did you draw from 2020 in particular in Nevada County?
Well, I mean, I think the big one is I learned that we can still do in-person voting during a global pandemic.
Hmm.
That was something that I did not imagine ever having to do. And the good thing for us here in California was that we did not have to be the first
Hmm.
to do it. So, at the time that Gavin Newsom issued an order to basically shut down the state because of COVID, we were in our office maybe 2 days away from certifying the March primary.
Hmm.
So all of us here in this state, or at least it felt like all of us, were looking to the next set of primaries to see what they were going to do. And I believe that there were, at least a couple of states in the Midwest who were going after Super Tuesday.
Hmm.
I believe they were, perhaps like Illinois and Wisconsin. And we really kept our eye out on them to see, what sort of process they were going through, and where we could, sort of either duplicate what they were doing well or avoid some pitfalls. So, it really was a collaborative effort to put the 2020 election on. And, one of my big takeaways from that is, the partnerships that we already had established here in elections. I mean, it just really re-emphasized how important those partnerships are, and how we should be communicating with one another
Hmm.
for, with as many touch points as possible. I mean, I think it's so important for our partners at the state to know, if we are having an issue, that, they are a resource for us to sort of draw upon. Now that we are, sort of in this post 2020 era where, there are, sort of real threats of, sort of political violence that could occur. at our vote centers that, we really worked hard here in Nevada County, and I'm sure other counties had the same experience to strengthen our connections to our local law enforcement and to make sure that they knew, for example, where our voting locations are. So if
Mhm.
there's a call with a problem that they know, sort of what they're getting into. We also, have these partnerships with groups like the Center for Safe and Secure Elections that just updated these handy little pocket guides for
Mhm.
law enforcement. And, basically these pocket guides, I mean, they, as the name indicates, they can fit in your pocket.
Mhm.
And they give law enforcement actual codes from the election laws that sort of
Mhm.
state, okay, well, what is not permissible at voting locations,
Mhm.
with respect to ballots and things like that. So I think that, our partnerships really make it um feel a lot safer, make us as a staff feel a lot more secure about what we're doing, and sort of knowing that we're not alone.
Mhm.
That again, this is a community effort.
No, that's great. I mean, there's two learnings there. One is taking advantage of your networks and the collaborations, right? The other sounds to me to really be prepared, right, for these physical threats, right, and to be collaborating with law enforcement and others to make sure that they're prepared and informed, right, if those threats emerge. Are there other than the threats of violence? Are there other concerns that you have about what's going to be going on in the next couple of weeks, couple of months, in terms of the election nationally? Do you see that there might be problems that we should be thinking of and trying to either resolve or kind of mitigate before we go into the election, both nationally and of course also in Nevada County?
I mean, there's always a I think a need to, sort of monitor what is happening around the country. One of the things that I and my colleagues have noticed is, sometimes there will be efforts to, either get information or otherwise sort of create doubts in the elections
Mhm.
process that occur in one state, and that process is replicated in our state. One of the sort of most obvious examples to me is the effort to bombard elections offices with public records requests.
Mhm.
And I mean, to a point where, I mean, we saw that it was the same template. One county even got a letter asking for information that really had nothing to do with their office, but one of the lines had in brackets, insert county name here. Because the requester had forgot to put that county's name in there. So, I think that we have a responsibility to answer all Records Act requests, no matter, how big or, how seemingly frivolous it may be.
Mhm.
It's our duty to take all of those seriously. And for a small office like mine, it can really have the effect of slowing things down quite a bit, because we have
Mhm.
to stop what we're doing and potentially gather hundreds or thousands of records in order to answer these requests.
Mhm.
I was looking actually at a internal folder that we have with all of our responses to all Public Records Act requests since, like, I don't know, like 2013 or something. And they were just like few and far between at one point. And then
Mhm.
after 2020, the number of requests just shot up
Mhm.
exponentially. And I know that, we sort of have it easy compared to other elections offices. We certainly don't get the level of requests that maybe a law enforcement office might get.
Mhm.
But it still is, sort of new to election administration. And we are, sort of anticipating that there will be more, likely post-election that
Mhm.
are going to happen depending on the result.
Mhm. Well, we'll see. I'm actually surprised by the number of information requests that you all receive. We recently got a data set from another California county, and it had hundreds going from just 2020 alone.
Mhm.
Um, Are these, so it sounds to me like some of these are legitimate, but some of them are meant to just be frivolous and to slow you down. Are there efforts, you think these are part of efforts to try to cast doubt on the process, or is it just to try to make your life a little more difficult? Or both, maybe?
Well, I wouldn't want to, sort of impose my own theories on, someone's motivations and thoughts, because I mean, I don't really know what the ultimate goal is. For example, I mean, there was a period of time where there were a lot of requesters across the country who were asking for something called a cast vote record.
Hmm.
That is basically report that shows, sort of ballot by ballot how somebody voted. Of
Hmm.
course, the person's name is not tied to that
Right.
ballot, but it is, a very large report. And, California had some, not so clear rules on what we could give and what we couldn't
Hmm.
give. And there was clarity, and we are now, sort of providing those
Hmm.
records. But I was scratching my head thinking, so what are they gonna do with, I mean, are they just gonna count up the votes and verify our results? Is there gonna be a report? And, I mean, it is not clear to me, where all of that information was put to use.
Hmm.
But I mean, in a way, it doesn't matter. I mean, when I answer a records request, I'm not sitting here thinking, well, what are they gonna use it for? They could use it for
Hmm.
anything that they want. I mean, no matter how frivolous or uncomfortable it may seem, we take all of them very seriously.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, people have a right to know about elections. And if you know an election official, you know that we love talking about it. Just hopefully not in an adversarial context.
Hmm.
I'd much rather have someone approach my office and say, "Hey, this seems weird to me. Can you
Hmm.
explain how you do this and this other thing in elections?" And yeah, I'm always happy to sit down with somebody and say, "Hey, here's how it works."
Hmm. Do you think that with these kind of requests and a lot of the misconceptions that are sort of swirling around elections these days, that some of your colleagues are going to go in the opposite direction, that they're going to be less transparent, less willing to provide this kind of information and data to the public and also to the research community? I mean, that seems to be a risk here.
I mean, that's not my experience. When, I talk to our colleagues,
Mhm.
I am always, sort of heartened by their efforts to try and be as transparent as
Mhm.
possible. But I think sometimes the language of a records request may be confusing.
Mhm.
So we do need to sort of navigate sometimes areas of the law that are not abundantly clear. The sort of guidepost for all of us, at least in my conversations with folks, has always been, is voters'
Mhm.
right to vote anonymously going to be protected?
Mhm.
Or, what do I need to think about in order to ensure that people's private information remains private?
Mhm.
I think that, once we can, sort of get over that hurdle of determining, is the, right to vote anonymously going to be preserved by my handing over these documents? Or, is
Mhm.
the voting system going to remain safe and secure if I hand over this set of documents? Then, I think that the rest of the records request is quite easy.
Mhm. Well, so one of the misconceptions that I know we're hearing a lot about, and I assume you're hearing a lot about it in Nevada County these days, regards non-citizens registering and voting. You talked earlier about the importance of the registration pillar, right, to conducting this upcoming election. And we just did a survey that was at the end of June, early part of July, right before the 4th of July weekend. And we found that 4 out of 10 US registered voters think that non-citizen voting is a common occurrence. And it's 2/3 of Republicans think that occurs commonly. Given Nevada County and its political makeup, is this a misconception you're hearing a lot of in Nevada County? And If someone comes in your office and says that, how do you counter that?
Well, I mean, yes, it is a misconception. It is not new.
Mhm,
There's always been someone who thinks that, there's all kinds of people who are voting who should not be voting. And in my experience and the experience of, all of my peers who, whenever this comes up, I don't know that there's even a majority of us who've seen it happen once.
mhm,
You hear about it on occasion where somebody, sort of registers and they are not a citizen, they're not supposed to be registered. But one out of how many millions of people live in the United States? It is so rare for something like that to happen. And, in a way, it doesn't make sense for someone who is a non-citizen to risk
mhm,
their application for citizenship by breaking the law. I have, heard some incidences here and there, and again, it's like maybe two or three
mhm,
out of the 20 something years that, I've been, sort of looking at elections either as an administrator or as a researcher. Um, and, some of these are really accidental.
mhm,
The person who should not be registered might not understand what what form they're filling in, or one of the concerns when states were starting to adopt automatic voter registration was that people who got a license at the DMV might be automatically registered, and they shouldn't be. And it's just a sort of pure administrative mistake.
mhm,
So here in California, the state makes the final determination on who is eligible and who is not. We now have real ID here in the state of California, and I think in a lot of states where the license and the sort of process of getting the license is different for people who do not have citizenship.
mhm,
So it is easier to check now. Um, it has never been, or at least not in modern elections policy, not been the case that any non-citizens could register and vote in federal elections.
mhm,
There are a few jurisdictions out there. I know one's in Maryland
mhm,
and, perhaps one other place where non-citizens can vote on purely local
mhm,
stuff. But I mean, this is not tipping the scales for any federal contests, certainly not president or, US Congress or anything like that. I think that it's really an unfounded worry. And, whenever it does happen, people have gotten caught.
mhm. So the way to counter these is to say, first off, it's incredibly rare and almost never happens, right? Secondly, there are lots of safeguards in place, right? Lots of things that you and the state do, right? That try to make sure that non-citizens don't register to vote. But third and most importantly, and you said this, and I don't think we emphasize this enough, it's a crime.
Yeah,
And if
definitely.
why would you jeopardize the potential process of becoming a US citizen by committing a crime like this? Um,
Yeah, I mean, it does not make sense to me to sort of worry as much as people do worry about it. But
okay.
I think there's messaging out there that sort of stokes that kind of concern. And I think that it is a hard problem. We have gotten sort of questions
Mhm,
recently in my office and in other offices, from people who want to guarantee that there's no improper registration on our rolls. And it's like, okay, well, I would love to be able to make that guarantee, but I can't. I can't stop people from lying. I don't think anybody can. So, I mean, is the, sort of chance zero that this will happen? No. I don't want to, sort of be Pollyanna-ish about it, or, sort of naive and think that no one would ever try to lie,
Mhm.
but I mean, maybe part of this is a little too optimistic. I do believe that most people want to be truthful.
Mhm.
And no one who is serious about becoming a US citizen is going to register to vote
Mhm.
when it is not legal.
So other than this particular misconception, are there others that you're hearing frequently in Nevada County these days?
Oh, well, I think it's the typical, sort of attacks on me personally,
Mhm.
um, which, again, it's a small number of people, but they're there. I do my best to try to answer everybody's questions in ways that are factual, but there's always going to be someone who's out there saying I'm, a secret political operative.
Mhm.
I can tell you, I am not. I've been no party preference for a very long time,
Mhm.
and not just because I hold the position that I hold.
Mhm.
There's always, the sort of persistent myth that somehow if you're voting provisionally that we don't count those
Mhm.
unless the contest is close. That is not true. Or, that if you stuff official drop box with a bunch of ballots, then we've counted all of them.
Mhm.
That is not true. We go through a, sort of very rigorous verification process to make sure that people only vote once. The voting machines are connected to the internet. They are not.
Mhm. Okay.
We hear all of it.
Okay. Yeah, again, this is something that has, really started to catch my attention. I've been working in this area for over 2 decades, and there just seem to be so many more misconceptions that just in rumors that just surround the election administration process than there ever have been. And it's just, I think it's important to talk about how people like you are encountering them and how you deal with them.
Well, I think that those kind of misconceptions have always been there. I think the difference to me is that the people who believe them are far more confrontational now
Mhm.
than they might have been 20 years ago or more. So, one example that sort of comes immediately to mind to me is, a gentleman had walked into our office during the 2024 March primary and sort of started off by saying, I need to come in here and ask why you're not counting Republican votes.
Mhm.
And he really gave my frontline staff a very hard time about it, and she was, sort of caught totally unprepared because
Mhm.
he didn't even have a real problem, except that, he had heard that we are just throwing away Republican votes, which of course was not true. And, we went through several steps to ensure him that what he was saying was not true, that, he was maybe getting a little carried away.
Mhm.
And the next day, he actually called our office and apologized because we and our staff had done such a good
Mhm.
job at, sort of picking apart in the most polite way possible all of the myths that, he
Mhm.
was sort of bringing to us. And, he, I think to his credit, had said, that that was not appropriate behavior. I'm really sorry.
Hmm. No, that's a good story. It's one of those kind of positive stories that I think indicates that if you really do sit down and you can have the opportunity to take the time and listen to what people's concerns and what the rumors they're hearing are, and hear them out, but spend the time to dispel those myths and rumors. It can actually be effective. However, it's incredibly time consuming.
It is time consuming, and it is sometimes unnecessarily confrontational, in my opinion. There were a lot of approaches that
Mhm.
this person could have took, and he, unfortunately took an approach that made my staff member feel deeply uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But again, I do sort of acknowledge that he did sort of come to the conclusion that maybe next time that there's another way to engage with our office because we do really want to be helpful. And I think he might have been expecting that we were going to sort of make excuses
Mhm.
or do something that was,
Mhm.
sort of less than helpful, or maybe, evade his questions. I mean, again, I don't know what he was thinking, but I think he did feel assisted.
So I want to switch topics a little bit here because we've got some really interesting questions are coming in. And as folks who are with us live, if you have questions, drop them in chat. One, and this question, I think it connects back to you were talking earlier about networks. And we were talking about networks and collaborations, but with your colleagues in the election administration community. Um, One of the things that I have to say, I think has been a sea change in this area has been the extent to which people like myself, like academics, are actually working directly with people like you. Now, this person pointed out to me that you apparently have written a chapter in a book with my Reed colleague, Paul Gronke. Now, that makes me incredibly jealous. Can you tell us a little bit about this chapter, and what the research that you've been doing with Professor Gronke?
It's not Paul, is it?
I can't reveal my source on this one. It's one of those little birds on my shoulder.
Okay. Yes, I did contribute to a chapter in an upcoming book that Paul Gronke and many of his colleagues and my friends have sort of contributed to. And so this all started, and actually the great work that Paul Gronke, Paul Manson, and others are doing sort of started when I was at an organization called Democracy Fund. Um, Paul, and I would say this to his face, Paul was, sort of maybe humble bragging to me that he had, all this, cool survey tools, set up to do, any survey that we wanted. And I'm like, okay, well, let's do one.
Mhm.
And the one I wanted to do was to sort of update work that had been done maybe, 10 or more years prior, to sort of survey local election officials and get a sense of, how they're viewing election administration and election policy. Do they like engaging with voters? What does, what does this cohort think about, things like, voter registration policy, sort of stuff like that. I think that, for a short time, he regretted bragging about the availability
Mhm.
of the sort of survey shop that he was sort of creating as we were going along. But I think that he has really taken that research and run with it, and I think it's sort of proven super useful. So the research that I contributed on was sort of understanding who is sort of at the helm of these elections offices, and how are they sort of um serving their voters. We at the time did not know a lot about who was actually leading the charge in
Mhm.
these 10,000 or so jurisdictions, depending on sort of how you count. And what we found was that overwhelmingly this profession is run by women,
Mhm.
and that they might not be getting paid comparably to sort of other positions within local government. So that chapter really sort of does a deep dive into what this workforce actually looks like. Are they sort of on the young side, or are they on the older side? What is the sort of makeup of these people, and is it representative
Mhm.
of our democracy? So by the book.
When is it out, or when is it? When it's
Oh, it's going to be out in November. I'm not sure exactly when in November, but I believe sometime after the general election it'll come
perfect
out.
timing. Yeah, and just as a matter of disclosure, I've known Paul Gronke pretty much my entire professional career. He was a young assistant professor at Duke when I was a grad student there, and one of my first articles is co-authored with Paul.
Oh,
And,
cool.
yeah, and I agree with you. I think that the work that they've been doing at the Early Voting Information Center up at Reed College on serving local election officials is just incredibly invaluable. So, but And thanks for the contribution to that project.
Oh, well, I'm glad I forced him to do it.
I agree. I agree. I think it's a really amazing project. And it's an example of the kind of projects that academics do these days that, again, just 20, 25 years ago, we just didn't do. But are there specific things like between now and, the end of the Canvas period that your academic friends and colleagues can do to help you and maybe election officials like yourself? I mean, are there specific projects we can undertake? Are there ways that we can help you as you're running this election in what's going to be a very close and probably conflictual period?
Well, I think that there are, some things, I mean, I'm not sure, exactly what projects you would want to do, but I think that there are certain things to keep in mind at this point in the elections process that, I think researchers would find really helpful.
Mhm.
So, first, and, I know people who, have very well-meaning intentions. Please don't send me a survey that's going to take me hours to complete.
Uh-oh.
I
Stop that
mean,
email from going out. Okay.
so, if you do, want information from the elections office, I would recommend doing it as a public records request.
Mm.
So, 'cause we do have a, sort of period of time where we need to have an answer for you. I know it sometimes feels a little bit adversarial to my colleagues, but what it does in effect is start a clock for us to be able to answer. And the only reason I'm really suggesting it is because we are all inundated right now with activities, and it takes us away from our desks. So it's really easy to miss an email at this stage of the game. So if you don't have a relationship with an elections office and you want data from them,
Mhm.
consider doing the records request. And, if your request is, sort of overly broad or, something, we will work with you to try to, sort of get you what you need. You might not get it all at once if it's a big request, but, we'll work with you on getting it done. Hopefully, you have everything that you need pre-election to do your research now. Um, Another thing that you could do is, maybe set up an appointment with an elections official and see what kind of data that they have, depending on, the nature of your project.
Mhm.
Sometimes we get data requests that we just haven't collected. It's not like we can't, but we didn't know. And, everything is already boxed up after the election. So, it is really hard sometimes to get information, especially when it doesn't exist. So,
Mhm.
for example, there was a person in a nonprofit organization that wanted to know, how many non-white people were voting in person. Now, that is not any data that we're going to collect, right? Not only is it really risky to have people ask
Mhm.
or collect that information at the polling place, but it is something that does not live really in a voter registration file, at least consistently.
Mhm.
So, if your survey, for example, has a whole bunch of questions that are sort of relate to data that we don't have, you might end up being disappointed. So, to the extent that we can, sort of find creative ways for you to get your measurements, I would ask before the election really gets underway. Um, and, I think the third thing to keep in mind is, we do have, sort of a ton of data that I think a lot of elections officials don't really know its usefulness.
Mhm.
So, again, if you know what your project is and what you're trying to find, I think the election official can, sort of help you out with, okay, well, here's what you might want to be looking for.
Mhm.
But an election produces data, like, I mean, just a ton of it. There's
Mhm.
all these data, and I mean, it is overwhelming. The more you can narrow down what your project is and what you need, we'll try our best to make sure that you get what you need. But again, I'm going to circle back to voter confidentiality
Mhm.
is of primary importance to us, and the security of voting systems
Mhm.
is also very important to us, not only because we don't want that information to get into the wrong hands, but we also don't want to break our contract with the vendor.
Right.
So yeah, I would encourage you all to please talk to your local election official, talk to state officials, find out what we have, and tell us what you're looking for.
It strikes me that maybe after this election's over, one thing you and I should do is just sit down and write a short little article on this very topic, right? How to talk to election and public officials if you want to get information and data. Those are really good things I've learned over the years. You've just all mentioned a number of things that I've learned. It'd be good to share that with others, so that they don't make your life difficult, but they get the data and information they need.
I mean, and we want you to be able to do your studies. I mean,
Right.
it's not like, we're not, or at least I'll speak for myself, but I'm pretty confident my other colleagues feel the same way. We're not anti-research.
Mhm.
But it is, sort of a head scratcher when, we get data requests
Mhm.
and we're like, okay, well, why didn't we know about this months ago so we could actually get this over to you right now? It's, kind of late.
Mhm. Well, no, you're not only not anti-research, you like to do it. And I'll note again with some degree of jealousy that you've written this article and contributed to Paul's volume. Congratulations on that. So is there anything like that we haven't talked about that you that's on your chest that you wanted to chat about? And
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm good. I think that you covered a lot of things. I would just, say to this group who, I, assume many of you are researchers.
Mhm.
Um, us elections officials, we like talking about elections, and it is starting to get to be a very busy time. Today is E-60. For
Mhm.
those of you who don't know, we count down to election day, and the 60th day before the election is one of, sort of, it marks one of many events that we have to, sort of get started on. One of them is getting started on the report of registration for the Secretary of State. We will have 10 days to declare readiness
Mhm.
with the state. We are bottom-up state, so we need to synchronize our database with the statewide database. That's
Mhm.
really all that is. And this also marks the first day we can start sending out ballots to our military and overseas voters. We'll have until the 45th day before the election to get that process completely done. In Nevada County, that's going to be I think pretty straightforward. We only have a couple of hundred UOCAVA voters, but
Mhm.
for bigger counties like San Diego, oh, that is a massive undertaking. Forgive us if we can't answer your email right away. Sort of starting now.
Mhm.
And I would also say that the other thing to keep in mind is, even though we all have very similar responsibilities, the sort of inner operations of an office do sort of depend on your jurisdiction size. I can
Mhm.
imagine that, you will get someone who is not the registrar of voters over in a big county like Los Angeles or in Orange, but in a smaller county like Nevada, we're generalists. We do everything here, including me. I am often up and, helping the team and, maybe less available, but, for reasons that aren't shared with the big county.
Mhm.
Yeah, have patience, maybe do the unthinkable and use the telephone to
Wow.
call.
Wow, that's a novel concept. Okay.
I know people are super weird about talking on the phone nowadays, and I'm like, you just need to get over it. I have a ton of Public Records Act requests, and sometimes it's nice to just convey information over the phone.
Wow. I've been told recently by some of my younger colleagues and friends, you should always text first.
Yeah, I don't really know why that is, because I mean, it's like you're either available or you're not.
Exactly.
You're either going to answer the phone or you're not. You know what young
Exactly.
people really don't like when I do is I put a period at the end of my sentence. I hear that's passive aggressive.
Apparently.
And
So,
it just
well, look,
makes me want to do it more. I'm a Gen
yeah,
Xer.
yeah, I'm even older than you, unfortunately. But look, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. It's always, just wonderful to chat with you and to learn from you as to how things are being conducted and what we can do as researchers to help.
No problem. And anyone who wants to get a hold of me, feel free to give them my email
Or phone number, right?
or phone number.
You give a call. Well, in any case, good luck with this election. I am sure we'll hear more from you and be in touch. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.